All right, welcome back. Welcome back. We are back here. We are at Tomboy Official. I'm recording. So we're past the weekend. The stock market's going nuts. But we're here to talk about some more topics that aren't necessarily COVID or the stock market. So yeah, I was kind of worried, honestly. I mean, I'll tell you what the topic's gonna be. Then I'm gonna do my normal little off-topic thing, and then I'll be back with the normal content. So basically, I was kind of worried, because when I record, I do kind of ramble, and I feel like, that's just kind of how I am. I'm not really like get down to business, like I feel like why not take a break? Why not, unwind and actually just like sit with things and let them stew and let them brew and let them ferment, and not really focus so much on what we always focus on, which is rush, rush, rush. I need to get through this as soon as possible. I need to multitask and do this and this and that. And everything seems like it could be shorter and more streamlined and easier to kind of try to multitask through versus just sitting and listening to something and trying to take it in. So, yeah, I came across this podcast that's by Breanne Williamson, and let me see if I can find the title of the podcast. I think I saved something by her because I was watching it earlier. Oh, so it was just her channel name, Breanne Williamson. Breanne Williamson. So her and her partner in crime, there's a gay male friend that she has, and she's a lesbian female, and they record together. They've had a podcast. I think the last episode I was listening to was episode 150. I think they're past that now anyways. I can check, but she's been going for a long time. She tends to have these like series, and I was like, I don't even know if people really like this whole lengthy, like kind of like drawn out, just like fly by the seat of your pants kind of thing. But then I started listening to hers, and I was like, wow, they like almost never get to the topic. Like, no offense, but it's like clearly people like it because they tune in and they come back. And I think sometimes people just want someone they can relate to, that they feel like, okay, this person kind of gets me, and we kind of have some things that come up in our lives that are in common, or somebody who talks about stuff that, you want to get some value out of listening to it and learning about it, and just like food for thought. And so I was like, yeah, maybe it's okay. Because I was really thinking about polishing stuff up and being like, just like polish it and make it like ultra nice, or make it like, just really streamlined and kind of like really organized. I try not to be too unorganized, right? I try not to come in with like zero topic, but I'll be honest. I mean, sometimes I'll be like, vaping in the middle of these, or like I'll have an edible or something, and then it's like my mind just like goes somewhere, and I'm like, I don't even know what I was talking about. So, but you guys get to hear me in those states of mind too. But this is how I take my breaks. This is part of how I take my kind of my breaks. And so, for me, I don't want to be all work no play, because I literally just work till like 4 o'clock. I'm starting I can't promise you, but I'm starting to try to post at 4:20. Most weekdays I've started kind of recording in advance. So I don't know if people have feedback about that, or if you like that, or if you hate that, or if it's just obnoxious. 420 to me, I mean, it's kind of a joke, just because I'm a 420 friendly type, but it just works because I get off work at 4, and then usually by the time I'm recording, it's already like around 4:20, around 4:15 p.m. And so I was like, well, why not just post at the time that I usually record? And then, it kind of just keeps it easier to keep track of. A lot of people who work, you are getting off work around 5, so there would be an episode posted for you usually by the time you're off work. If you work a 9 to 5, if you get off earlier than 5, then, it's not like in the middle of dinner or anything, but you might be running errands, you might be cooking, you might be picking up your kids. If you're younger and you're in school, not necessarily college, because I know I've been in college and I know that you can have a crazy wild schedule that doesn't make any sense, that you can have 4 or 5 hours between your classes. But so it doesn't really mean that you're going to be off class at like 5. You might be off at 3, and then you might have another class at like 8 p.m. I mean, like, I've been there. I know how that is. But I think, around 4-ish weekdays is kind of like that sweet spot where it's like, if you're at work, you're winding down. If you're, typical kind of school timing, usually you're going to be off school by like 3 p.m. if you're like younger than like high school or so. If you're working, you're usually going to be off work by like 5. 6 o'clock is kind of hard because a lot of people start cooking or they're eating by 6 p.m. for dinner, or 6:30 or 7 or 8:30. I know people who even eat dinner at like 9 p.m. But some people are eating late, so I feel like later in the night is too late. And then early in the morning, I don't want to record these in the morning, honestly, because I'm trying to work. And then it's like, I've already explained the reasons why I record outside of the house. And so it's like, it just makes sense for me to record it and post it near 4:20. And because I like that time and it's easy to remember. But we'll see. I mean, I'm liking this recording in advance and then posting for a later date, so that I think the other day I recorded like 3, 4, 5 episodes, multiple episodes, however many it was, and then I kind of posted them all up, so that was nice. But I kind of enjoy that. I kind of enjoy posting multiple episodes, and then I kind of lined them up like every day there was going to be one posting at 4:20 p.m. So I hope you guys like that. That was last week. I see I got some listeners coming in for that, so that was cool. And thank you. And if you're new here, welcome. If you're new here, yes, I take a long time kind of just rambling in the beginning, but let's roll into it. Shoot, I never told you what the topic was gonna initially be, but hopefully the title will help. But the reason why I mentioned Breanne Williamson is because in her podcast, her and her gay male friend that they do the podcast together, they were talking about some of the complexities of dating, LGBT dating. This can apply to people even if you're not LGBT, and it's like sexuality related versus like gender related kind of differences, gender minorities, sexual minorities. They mentioned something that kind of comes up, that in the straight world this isn't like a thing, right? So something that they mentioned was when straight people date each other, it's like a dude, a female. We're gonna assume they're cis in this scenario just because it's that makes it so that they're not like necessarily like gender minorities, and there's a cis hetero couple, and a lot of times what happens is there's a man, there's a woman, they have their roles. I mean, it's not 100%, right? But it's like, usually it's like the guy is usually going to be the one who's approaching the girl, the female. Um, this man, usually goes about it in whatever method he does. And then the woman accepts it eventually, if not on the spot. And then they go out on dates, they get to know each other. If it doesn't work out, then what usually happens? We usually know that they will cease to engage with one another. And usually, maybe they'll be friends, but usually they don't have to be friends. It's not mandatory for them to be buddies or friends. But they might be friends. They might not be friends, but they might be friends. And so they become friends, and if that, but if they're not interested in each other, they kind of just part ways, and that's that, right? Now, what was mentioned was that, so in the LGBT communities and with gender minority communities, a lot of times, a lot of us seek out relationships. And the way we do it might be different than like the cis hetero people do. A lot of times we have to find communities or find apps or find spaces where our people are hanging out that we have an interest in. So a lot of times we like to find someone who is like us, who identifies similarly or can understand the struggle of our identities, and all the minority status that goes along with it, and all the minority microaggressions and all sorts of, prejudices and things that we encounter. So we have that, wanting somebody who's kind of like you, that's maybe a friend. And then we have, wanting someone that you're interested in. You might find someone you want to date. Now, a lot of times this might not happen super organically. Because, say for example, if you work at a restaurant, or you work at a clinic, or you work at a store, or whatever, you might not have a type of work environment where you're going to be like a team environment, first of all. Second of all, even if you do have a team type of work environment, or a type of work environment where you can hang out outside of work, interact together outside of work, and be together, making friends with your coworkers outside of work and getting to know one another, a lot of times you might get to know each other, and just like learn about each other a little bit. Like, you might start learning about one another, and you might start, getting to know one another, and you might start, trying to interact. But the issue can be that it's not the easiest kind of setting to really try to meet people organically at work, that you might potentially date. If you're interested in dating someone who's maybe like a sexual or gender minority, or if you are one yourself and you're trying to date other people, I mean, a lot of it's not clear how to really navigate that. Like, hetero cis people just ask each other out and that's it, But like, if you're a lesbian woman or a gay man and you're cis, and you see just like a man or a woman that you're attracted to, and you just go ask out the same gender of a person, I mean, you don't always know if they're even, gay or lesbian or whatever. You don't even know their sexuality, and it's hard to really assume. I mean, straight people don't know their sexuality either, but I feel like if a hetero cis woman or a hetero cis male asks out someone of the opposite gender, if they ask somebody out, it's not going to be seen as so like if you ask out a gay person, or if you ask out a lesbian, it's not going to be like, oh, can you believe that like this person asked you out, and like how dare they thought I was straight. You know what I mean? It's like that does nothing to their reputation, to their status at work, to their status at school. It's like if you're cis hetero, you can just ask out anybody you want to ask out who's the opposite gender, and that's socially acceptable. No one's really gonna like think twice about it, right? But think about it. An example, if you're a lesbian female and you go and you're like, I'm attracted to women, and I see a couple women maybe at work that I might be interested in getting to know, and if they don't know you're gay, or if other people don't know you're gay, lesbian, however you identify, if nobody knows that, or if you don't want to reveal that, or if you don't want everyone to know that, and you just want to, maybe you trust a couple people, but you don't maybe trust every single person equally. So maybe if you want to do that, and then you look over and you're like, okay, like, that's a risk, it can be a risk potentially to ask out somebody of the same gender. Because you're putting yourself out there. You're like, well, clearly you're asking them because you're lesbian, Like, if you weren't lesbian, you wouldn't be approaching women necessarily to, like, ask them out on dates. I mean, you can still be questioning. You can be bi, you can be a different type of identity. But, I mean, still, if you're not a cis, straight, identifying, female, then to ask out another female wouldn't really make any sense unless you're just kind of, very open or something. But you probably wouldn't like necessarily identify as a cis hetero woman if you were going to ask out other women. Or maybe you identify that way, but your actions don't really align with necessarily how you feel. But or maybe it's like on occasion you like females, whatever it may be. But usually, to keep things simple, cis hetero people don't tend to ask out people of the same gender. And people who are not cis hetero people, if they're asking out somebody of the same gender, or if they're asking out a non-binary person, or if they're asking out a trans person, I mean, that can be a complex situation to try to navigate. Because what happens if you ask somebody out, they go and blab to everybody like, oh my gosh, so-and-so asked me out. Did you know that they were a lesbian? Did you know this guy's gay? This guy asked out this other guy. Like, you don't know if they're going to start spreading rumors. You don't know if they're going to be uncomfortable and be like, oh, sexual harassment because you asked me out and now I feel uncomfortable. And even if they did do that, and even though that's not considered sexual harassment, depending on your work environment, depending on your, how your job actually is comforting, and if you have allies and if they're kind of like culturally respectful, you might actually get some kind of punishment or negative kind of retaliation just for asking somebody out of the same gender, if that person is offended by that and feels harassed. Now, I mean, I'm not saying that like gay or lesbian people or non-straight people or non-cis people can never be in the wrong or can never harass somebody or can never do sexual harassment against someone or can never, do that. But I mean, like, if it was just like the only reversal was just that it was the same gender person asking out a same gender person, and it was respectful that the way that they approached it, and it wasn't like weird or like strange or making somebody feel like pressured or something, or if it was like professional, like not in a professional, like I don't know if you can professionally ask somebody out, but like um not like maybe in a professional space even, and like maybe, it was during another time period, like when you're kind of like getting to know one another after work or school or something in like a group, and then you're like, you and this person are like alone because everyone else may be ordered, and you're sitting with them kind of at the table or something, and then you just kind of ask them like, hey, like you kind of tell them that you're interested and kind of ask them out on a date. I mean, that's a hard situation to navigate, and it sounds like it should be the easiest thing on earth, but it's difficult, right? So just that alone, just the request of the date, the interest in somebody, that alone can just already be like such a stressor and such an issue to not even really know how to address it, right? So that's one aspect that makes it hard. But what Breanne Williamson was talking about also was that not only is it hard to ask somebody out, but it's like, a lot of us who aren't cis straight people have these, kind of interesting ways that relationships form. And so, like the reason why I mentioned all that is like the organic way of like kind of asking someone out without really using like apps or using like maybe even like meetup groups. Like you just met at something that's like part of your casual day to day, and you meet and you start interacting, and then you start developing an interest, one or both of you, right? That would be considered like an organic way of meeting. And a lot of hetero cis people meet this way. It's, normal for them to meet this way. It's average for them to meet this way. It's not looked at as like some strange thing. But when you're not a cis hetero person, it's hard to organically meet people. It's not impossible, but it's like there is that risk involved, right? And so a lot of us go to apps or go to functions or clubs or safe spaces or bars, or if there's like a mixer at the center or like some kind of like community thing or whatever, like you kind of go to something that's already available for you to find someone to try to date them, or to find someone who you might have an interest in, and then when you're interested you go on a date together. So this isn't out of the norm, this isn't uncommon, this isn't weird, but the thing that makes it so challenging is that, you don't really know what to really do. Like if you go and you date someone off of an app and say it doesn't work, and you're dating, because you're on a dating app, right? And the person's like, I want to accept to go out on a date with you after you've spoken a little bit, and like you make a plan to meet in person. If you're, I don't know, with all the Rona distancing and all this, who knows, when, depending on when you're listening to this, if the world is open when you're listening to it, or if the world hasn't completely just like collapsed in on itself by the time this episode is released. Back in the day, we used to meet each other in person. So assuming you meet each other, you talk, and say it doesn't, say you're like, okay, it goes well enough, but we're just not, there's no chemistry, or like, I could see myself hanging out with this person, but, like, I don't really want to date them. Like, and the things that make you want to date somebody, are things that you're not really going to know straight away from like a couple early text conversations on like a dating app. Usually you're going to need to like see them in person. Usually the first impression, you hope that it's good, but a lot of times first impressions are like not the full picture of the impression of how a person can be with you. So you might get a little bit of a first impression, Um, and then you're like, that's not like 110% how the person's usually going to be. So a lot of times the way you find out if you even like somebody, you have to see them a few times, right? So you get to know them okay, and then, but because you've already chatted and talked a little bit, and then you met and you've had a couple interactions, um, it's not uncommon to just get ghosted and then people just disappear off the face of the planet and you're like, oh, well, there's another one down, or you keep talking, but you're like, there's no chemistry. But a lot of times what happens that's different in non-cis hetero relationships, the difference seems to be based on what Breanne Williamson in the podcast was saying, and it's true. The difference tends to be you start dating. You start with like a dating app or a speed dating or a social mixer, or you meet at a bar, or you meet at a club, or you meet somewhere where it's like a party or pride or like something like that, and you meet and then you start dating, and then you're like, oh, like I maybe am not so interested in this person, so I don't want to date them anymore, but I want friends that I can relate to on this level, and so you'll stay friends. A lot of times people tried more than just like going out on dates, and maybe they hooked up, and maybe they, had some kind of more of like an intimate phase of things, and, and then they're like, oh, let's take a couple steps back. I'd rather be friends. And, people have the right to say that and the right to do that. And they don't really need to run it by anybody. It's not like there's nothing wrong with just being friends. But if you think about cis hetero couples, they don't usually do things that way. They're not usually like, okay, let's have like an intimate kind of, relationship to start things, and we get all detailed in like all these intimate aspects of our lives, and now we're gonna reverse and just go back to like a casual friendship, and we've already slept together, we've already had all these like moments and all this kind of stuff. And so it's a little bit different, because when you're starting with that kind of a relationship, it kind of gets a little blurry. I mean, anyone who's dated lesbians routinely, not routinely, like you're just going through them, but I mean like anyone who's gone out on dates with lesbians as, an interest that you have, and that's who you like to date as your preferences and your, interests, you probably notice that, friendships and dating get a little bit blurry, not all the time, but it's not uncommon for there to be some blurred lines there where you're just like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if this person's really interested in me. I don't know, like, if they are interested, if they're not interested, if it's me, if it's them. I don't know what the hell is going on, right? And so a lot of times we might not even notice what's happening. We might not really know what to expect. We might not really know who we like. But, one thing to try to figure out that can help is, to try to find out, what you want when you're dating. So things that can help are, knowing what kind of style you prefer, a communication even, like, do you like direct people who, regardless of how their emotion sounds, they just like say the words of what you want to understand, and they inform you of whatever it is that's happening in whatever tone, whatever they just like tell you? Do you prefer that, or is that like a little emotionally challenging or difficult to deal with when somebody's like a little like rough or a little like direct with how they're speaking, right? So that would be one thing. That's not like I don't know how to order them. I don't know if that would be like the first thing, but that's like one thing. Because if a person doesn't naturally communicate the way that you want them to communicate, I mean, we're gonna assume when you're dating someone, we're always gonna kind of assume that the person isn't gonna change, right? Now, do people develop? Do people, gain more insight into their lives? Do people, improve their awareness of things that they can change and like work on like self development and like improve at different stuff, sexually, socially, emotionally, psychologically, financially? People can change in a lot of different ways like that if they want to and if they work on it. But if a person hasn't expressed that they want to change something, if they haven't started working on the actual change of something, if they haven't, started, stating their own kind of preferences with what to work on, then, it's best to assume that they're just not going to change. So if somebody is too direct for you and they're not like sensitive seeming and you need them to be more sensitive and they just can't seem to get it down, it's like, getting into a relationship where somebody's like that might become a challenge where when you're like, okay, I need someone to be a little kind and very gentle and very sensitive and very soft spoken all the time, and this other person, I like them but they're not that way. So the reason why communication is important is because it connects with other things, right? So if it's connecting with for example, like your levels of trust, right? So it's going to be hard to develop trust in a person that you can't have a slightly like tense or vulnerable conversation with. If you have a concern that you wanted to bring up, right? If you have a concern and you're like, I'm really concerned about this and I really don't know how to talk about it, and I never brought it up before, and I've never spoken on this before, and I want to be open about this certain topic with this partner, with this person I'm dating, and then I know that I need them to react in a certain kind of manner, and then they automatically aren't really able to just like turn that switch off where they can become more sensitive and, lightly toned and like, just like, maybe, they're a hothead or maybe they're a joker and they just kind of like to joke and like, be sarcastic or something like that, But if you don't need that and they're already that way, it's going to be hard, when you start trying to develop, deeper levels of things, if you can't really get them, not even really get them to change, but if you can't even really like get on the same page of like how to like interact, that's not going to be easy, assuming that they're not going to change. Now, if you guys do get to a point where like, okay, they want to change or they've, noticed that they want to do things differently, then okay, but again, like we all know that, going into a relationship expecting someone else to change, it's like you kind of have to take people for who they are. Of course, people can get better and do better and be better, but it's like, that's going to be on them and the relationship and space that you guys create together. That's still going to be on them to uphold kind of that end of the bargain and do their part. And if they're not going to do that part, then I don't really know what you're going to do. But just keeping that in mind, that's food for thought. Keep that in mind. Yeah, communication is, it's really connected to so many things. Like if you can't communicate about like even intimacy, if that's like emotional intimacy or physical intimacy or anything, and this person's like constantly hurting your feelings and they're not intending to hurt your feelings, like you can probably see how that's not really gonna be the best option, if this person can't really change their style of how they interact with you. So that's just kind of one thing, to look at. Another thing to look at is, like kind of, I guess, people always talk about love languages, and that's definitely one. I think communication and styles and expectations, that's another one. Love languages, just real quick for people who don't really know what that is too much. Like, some people like acts of service or getting gifts or giving gifts. Like, look, love languages goes two ways. Like, there's a love language as in how you like to express your love, and then there's also how you prefer for people to show that they love you. So if your idea of like the best possible option is someone who wants to spend quality time together, um but to you quality time is like we can go out on a date once a week and then like that's it, versus someone who wants to spend, maybe the other person is like, I prefer quality time, not quantity time, not quality. So maybe for the other person, it's like, I want to see you more. It doesn't matter what we're doing, we can just be sitting at the coffee shop next to each other studying together, or we can be, you know, on a Zoom call in our own separate houses, in our own separate bedrooms while we're both doing our own separate things. Like, there's not really a lot of quality to that because you might not be interacting, but they want to be more interacting, on more occasions, even if the quality isn't always there, versus another person that's like, I don't want to spend like 30, 40 minutes, an hour, 2 hours every couple days, interacting with you. I'd rather just see you once for a nice date and spend a few hours together just connecting directly with each other without like any other things going on in the background, because there's only so many hours in the day. So that kind of thing, love languages really do make a difference. Now I think love languages are something where people can compromise. Like, if you know that somebody likes gifts and you never give them a gift, it's like, you know, or if you know somebody's uncomfortable getting gifts, doesn't like getting gifts, and you like giving them gifts, it's like you might be able to find a happy medium. Because sometimes you have things that you need to do and things that you want to get, and the other person will have that too, and so, some people are really stubborn about things. That's going to be hard to work with, but, some people are pretty flexible, and that's kind of best, honestly. And another thing to kind of look out for that, and people don't talk about this much, but another thing to look out for, which is something that you aren't going to easily learn right away, unless somebody really doesn't have, like, too wonderful of boundaries and they just overshare too early about stuff. But, if somebody's been through traumas, a lot of people have been through traumas. Cis hetero people included have been through a lot of traumas. But, sometimes it's like, I mean, yeah, if you keep adding like minority statuses to things, there's going to be trauma there, a lot of the time. And so just putting into consideration the trauma, that somebody has experienced, I found something that really helps is learning about a person, from their trauma. Even if they're not like openly just being like, oh, I experienced all this trauma and let me like tell you all the details of the trauma. Even if it's not that, you can learn about somebody's trauma by just listening to them. Like, for example, if they talk to you about coming out and they say, they start talking to you about how maybe they're not out at work right now, and maybe they have roommates and they're not out to their roommates, and maybe they go to work and they're not out at work, but maybe where they volunteer, they're out to everybody there. And maybe there's reasons why they're not out, and maybe, they had some terrible experiences with like family members when they were coming out earlier, in life, and maybe they got disowned or something like that, right? So, it's possible to have a lot of traumas, and you might not know the details of the trauma. Like, you don't really always need to know all the details, but just kind of noticing, like, the barriers that have come up in their life, the stressors that have come up in their life, the difficulties that they face on the day to day, things like that. If you're observant and just kind of like aware, becoming aware of like what they deal with, what they've dealt with, what they go through, you can kind of learn more about how to treat them. And if you don't know how to treat them, you can kind of open that conversation of like, how do I treat you better based on this thing? Like, if you know that somebody's parents disown them and then the holidays come up and they're lonely every holiday, and you know that they're not feeling good, it's like, what do they need from you during the holidays? Do they need you to call them, or do they need to go out and like have some snacks together one night, or do they not need a thing from you? Do they need a lot? Do they need a little? Do they need nothing? Like, it's hard to really know, right? Like, how you really find out what somebody really wants or needs from you if you don't really talk to them. I mean, a lot of it you can kind of tune in and just kind of notice stuff. Just winging it without like any kind of strategy or any kind of like method or any kind of like, um, kind of like, yeah, just winging it without any kind of like, um, like without any kind of a, yeah, like without any, sorry, there's like somebody staring at me. Um, but yeah, if you're just like winging it, um, it's gonna maybe take a little bit longer, but also being pretty patient, because a lot of times, something that can happen is that people might not really know. Like, they might not really know what they want from you or what they need from you. They might not really know how to express it. They might be a little like passive about things and like, oh, I don't need anything. Everything's great. Like, I like the way things are together with the two of us, and like, yeah, we can keep things exactly like this. I don't need you to like do anything different. And, they might be like afraid of like losing the connection or like upsetting you or something. So they might not really be too forthcoming, even if you try to like open that conversation. So, I mean, it's just important to know, what you can learn, and, just knowing that, if you really care about somebody, it makes it a lot easier to try to get better at learning about them and connecting to them. Connecting to them in the way that you need, but also in the way that they might need to connect to you. And trying to always just like evaluate how things are going. And, communication really helps, but it's not, it's not 100% foolproof. Like, it's, you can still have, problems that come up because of it. And so that might make it a little more challenging. But yeah, it's an interesting kind of thing to think about, because I never really thought about it before Breanne Williamson's podcast kind of mentioned that, yeah, like a lot of times, there's like straight people and there's not straight people, and we sometimes don't really do things the same exact way. And when it comes to like maybe hetero people that are not cisgender people, I mean, that's another difficulty for, those people usually to navigate, and it can be difficult for other people to navigate. I hate the term passing, but it's like, a lot of times, humans, our minds are just, they don't help us sometimes, right? So like, if you see a person, a lot of times we look at them and we're like, okay, this person is, maybe they're black, or maybe they're some kind of, they're black from some kind of culture, or Asian from some kind of culture, or whatever. And we kind of just make assumptions about that. And then you learn more about them. You're like, oh, maybe their parents are immigrants. And so you make more assumptions about that. And then you learn about, maybe not just are their parents immigrants, but, so they're an ethnic minority and their parents are immigrants. And you kind of make like different assumptions about things. Just automatically our minds do that. And it does that because it's an ease of processing. It takes less effort to sit and think about all the details of potential options of a person that you first meet. You can look at their size, you can look at their, how they talk, their accent, different things like that, and make a bunch of assumptions easier than you can take time to learn about them in detail in all these different areas that are being assumed about. And we kind of have to make those quick decisions a lot of times. Like, we can't really, a lot of times we don't have like the luxury of being like, oh, like, I'm going through a McDonald's drive-through and my, the person who is taking my money is, a person who looks like they were born male, assigned male at birth, and, but they have like these nails and their voice is kind of maybe like a higher pitch, and, they look like they're from like this certain type of ethnicity, and like maybe their English is kind of accented, and we, how short is that interaction? You're not going to sit there necessarily and be like talking to this person, in the drive-through to try to learn all the details about their life so that you can properly like address them the way that they need to be addressed so that you're not being offensive, right? But there are some rules of thumb of like how to be like cordial and polite and respectful and not really just being like a dick. But sometimes it's hard to really learn how to be. And it's hard to know how to act or know how to be when it's like subtle stuff. And I can give an example. Like, I went through a Jack in the Box. I don't know how long ago that was. It must have been a few years back. I'm not saying I've never eaten Jack in the Box for like a few years. I'm just saying this exact time, I think it was actually like maybe a Burger King. I don't know. It was a while ago. And I saw this person that seemed like, to me, the person seemed like they were assigned male at birth and had like nails. They had their nails done. I think they were like acrylic kind of nails or something. I don't even know what they're called. Just press-on nails. I don't know. The kind that are like longer than your actual nail. The fake ones. I don't know if you call them fake nails or what. But this person had on these like fake nails, and it was like a pink glittery color. And I thought the nails were cool. And I know nothing about nails. I don't even, like, even when I've dated like women, I've never been like, oh, like, I really like your nails. Like, that's not really something that I really look at. I'm not really into long nails. It's weird to me. I find it just kind of like a thing that, like, I just don't understand it. It's not really my thing, and I don't find it, I don't know. It's like a sanitary thing in my head. I'm kind of like, that just doesn't feel like the most sanitary of options. Because if you get stuff under your nails and then like, I'm really kind of like weird about people having like dirty nails. That's kind of just like gross to me. But, yeah, like long nails. And I commented, oh, I really like your nails, like, and I meant it because I did, but it was kind of, in my mind, it was kind of a comment that, because I was like, well, he looks like a guy. This person looks like a guy, and they have cool nails. Like, for some reason, I was like, I like this on this person as like a male looking, like a masculine presenting person with like those cool, like, fancy nails. Like, I like just kind of like how the look was, like the style of it all. Now, they didn't say anything. I don't know if they didn't hear me. I don't know if they just don't address that kind of thing. I don't know if I was being offensive. But I genuinely meant what I said. I was like, dude, this is cool. Like, I like that you have those nails, you know, like I was cool with it, you know, like I've known people who appear to look more feminine and they've had like beards, and I was like, I mean, I've never just like approached a female like that and been like, oh, like your beard is cool, but it's like, you know, I've known some people with some facial hair that look more feminine, and sometimes I'm like, oh, it's kind of cool. But I was just saying it because I like kind of that, like I like people either playing with kind of like just different gender related stuff. Now these people I didn't really know this person, so I can't say were they playing with it, was it part of their identity, was it a comfort thing, was it a dare? I don't know. Like I don't know this person. I don't really know the situation. I just know that they didn't say anything back. And then I was thinking, you know, well, maybe saying things like that isn't polite. You know, because maybe they just don't want to talk about it or whatever. Like, I'm not trying to get in some like in-depth conversation, but it's like, you know, I just thought it was cool, and I wanted to give the compliment, but also it's like I can kind of see how that would be a little weird. Like I've gone places and had like a more mask presenting look and had people compliment on it, and I was like, I don't even know what to do with this. It was a little like maybe embarrassing, but at the same time like I appreciated it. Like I was at a dispensary and this one lady was like really kind of cool about my shirt. I had like this button up and she was like, that looks really good on you. It's a really nice shirt. And I was like, thanks, you know. And then there was another cashier that I came up to. It was a different time. I was wearing a different kind of shirt, and that cashier kind of had like this kind of queer look about them. They looked like they were trying to like present kind of queer, in a stereotypical way. Like they were kind of like androgynous, and they were like, "Oh, like you're looking dapper" or something like that. And I was like, "Oh, thank you," you know, like, and it was kind of one of those things that was like, "I see you" kind of thing, and like I kind of, you know, those two like dispensary experiences. I've been way more than 2 times, but I mean, those two dispensary experiences were good experiences to me. Even though it's a little awkward, but it's like sometimes I do appreciate people just kind of noticing like this is kind of who I am and what I prefer and what I like to do, and somebody not being like, why aren't you wearing a dress? Why don't you wear some heels? Why don't we buy you some makeup? Why is your hair longer and straighter, and like all this kind of stuff. It's like sometimes it's nice to just like be able to be you, do your thing, and have somebody be like, oh, I like what you are doing here, and it's like, cool. That's nice. I don't see it as like a bad gesture for someone to say anything about it, but also it's like, yeah, they are strangers, so I don't know. But yeah, I think yeah, just overall when it comes to all the dating and all the interacting and all the, you know, it's hard to really predict what somebody wants from you, what they need from you. I mean, I don't think it's good to like overly be like so worried that you can't even like think straight or talk straight, and being like so worried that like you're going to get something wrong. But, you know, because everyone's going to get something wrong eventually, but it's like, you know, if something's wrong, you know, you don't want to really get to a point where you can't repair things, or where the person, like, the trust is gone now because like oh, like I didn't do this right by this person, and then like now they just totally don't even trust me anymore ever. Like that is kind of a shitty situation to have to deal with. So you know, you don't want to like, you know, damage the trust or the potential for like a more trusting relationship to develop, but you also don't want to be like so worried that like you can't just be yourself, because you can't, you know, it's going to be hard if you're trying to just like hide yourself. That's going to be hard. You can't really keep that up forever. It's not really going to be sustainable. But I don't know what you guys think. Um, yeah, it's a long ramble, almost a 9-minute ramble at the very beginning, but I'm getting hungry, guys. Like, I'm gonna go to my favorite. Well, this isn't my favorite, but the closest Mexican. I got this taco shop near me. It's a taco shop that has a drive-through, and I love it so much. So, no, it's not Taco Bell, it's not Del Taco. It's authentic, dude, and I love them. Right now, this place is cheaper than fast food, and they give you way more food. Like, I can get a massive burrito that's like the size of like a Chipotle burrito for like $6. I can get like a quesadilla. I think their combos are like 8 something dollars. It's not even $10. And if I go to McDonald's and get like a McMuffin and a coffee combo or whatever, it's like 10 something. So it's like, screw this. Yeah, keeping it, local, buying local and small business supporting, and their food is bomb, and they're always really sweet. And yes, they take forever when you're in the line, but who cares, because the food's really good. So I'm gonna go do that, and thanks for listening, guys.